Depending who you talk to, you may have come across the advice to put your growth investments in your TFSA. It sounds smart, tax-free growth forever. Who wouldn't want that? But could that be the wrong move? Well, depending on your timeline, tax bracket, and even how your state is set up, that one-size-fits-all rule can quietly cost you thousands. Most Canadians never revisit what's inside their TFSA after setting it up, and that's where the trouble starts. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a practical playbook for getting your TFSA right, how to match your investments to your goals, when it actually makes sense to shift money from a non-registered or RRSP account, and the small estate election mistake that can undo a lifetime of smart planning. Whether you're saving for something in the next few years or thinking about generational wealth, this video will help you see your TFSA not just as a box for growth, but as a powerful, flexible tool when used at the right time for the right purpose. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm Jacqueline Ozdemir, a financial advisor with Ferguson Financial Planning. I spend my days helping Canadians make smarter decisions about how their money is structured, not just where it's invested. And honestly, one of the most common questions I get is around the TFSA. Am I using it the right way? I've seen people treat it like a catch-all and others ignore it entirely, which tells me there's still some confusion about what this account can really do. So in today's video, we're going to clear that up. I'll walk you through how your time horizon should shape what's inside your TFSA, why holding cash there isn't necessarily lazy, and when it actually pays to move investments from other accounts into it. We'll also look at how to use the TFSA strategically during low tax years, how to place the right assets in the right accounts, and finally, how to set it up properly for your estate. If you find this helpful, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the question that secretly drives almost every TFSA decision. When do you actually need the money? Because that, more than anything, determines what belongs inside of it. Everyone's heard some version of put your highest growth investments in your TFSA. And when your horizon is long, say 7 years or more, that's usually solid advice. The longer your runway, the more time you have for markets to do their thing, to compound and to recover from any bumps along the road. Growth-oriented, exchange-traded funds, Canadian equities, or broad global funds make sense here because the tax-free savings component inside a TFSA becomes powerful when you let it marinate for years. But if you expect to dip into that TFSA soon, say to buy a home, help your child with tuition, or replace a car, then holding volatile growth stocks becomes risky. The rules do allow qualified investments like stocks, mutual funds, GICs or guaranteed investment certificates, treasury bills, and saving type deposits inside a TFSA, but what fits should match the job you need the money to do. Imagine saving for a home in 2 years. If your TFSA drops 15% right before you need that money, you don't get a do-over. That's where a simple time horizon matrix helps. So here's a practical way to think about it. If your timeline is under 3 years, target safety first. Think TFSA, high interest savings, T-bills, or short-term or cashable GICs. If your goal stretches between 3 and 7 years, a balanced mix, roughly half in equities, half in fixed income, let's say, helps you capture some growth without the big swings. For anything beyond 7 years, that's when you can lean toward growth-focused funds or equities, keeping maybe 10% in cash for flexibility if you think you need it. Case in point. Jennifer, age 38, planned to buy her first house in about 2 years. She had her TFSA fully invested in tech growth funds because she'd heard that smart might. But the purpose of what that account was doing wasn't long-term growth. It was a staging ground for her down payment. We calculated that if her portfolio dropped 10% at the wrong time, she'd lose more than 1 year of savings progress. So she moved into a TFSA high-interest savings approach, earning around the mid-single-digit range, all tax-free. It wasn't flashy, but it was a reliable way to invest. And 2 years later, she had her full down payment intact. Bottom line here, growth in the TFSA is goal dependent. Your TFSA isn't a label, it's a container. What matters is what you're using it for and when. People sometimes feel guilty about holding cash in a TFSA, like it's wasted space. But cash, when used intentionally, can be one of the smartest plays in your plan. Here's why. When the money is needed soon, safety dominates. A TFSA high-interest savings approach or short-term treasury bill fund can deliver a better after-tax yield than a regular savings account simply because that interest grows completely tax-free. Suppose your TFSA earns roughly 5%. If you had the same rate in a taxable account and your marginal tax rate is about 45%, your after-tax return would be about 2.75%. That gap matters. And if your goal date is close, like Jennifer's, for example, you simply can't afford a market dip. No fancy rebalancing beats sleeping at night knowing the money will be there when you need it. The TFSA rules don't force you into growth assets. It's about holding qualified investments that are suitable for your purpose. Another quick scenario that illustrates my point here. Mark and Ella plan a renovation and will pay contractors in about 18 months. They had mutual funds in their TFSA that did well since 2020, but they didn't want a downturn risk right before the payments were due. They shifted to a short GIC ladder inside their TFSA, locking in yields in the mid-single digits. They avoided volatility, kept compounding tax-free, and when the renovation bills came due, the funds were there with no stress and no trying to time the market. Behaviorally, when money is invested in volatile assets, we tend to anchor towards the asset's performance and we start to get twitchy. But when your TFSA is cash-based with a clear, short-term job, it's easier to stay the course. The key is to reevaluate when your goal shifts. If that renovation gets delayed or your home purchase moves out a few years, graduate that cash into a balanced mix. Cash in the TFSA doesn't mean you're being lazy, it's a disciplined approach. It's saying this capital has a job to do and it's going to do it safely. Selling investments in a non-registered account to fund a TFSA sounds clean. Move money from taxable to tax-free. The catch is capital gains tax today versus tax-free growth tomorrow. The question, is the upfront tax worth the long-run savings? Use a simple tax trigger test. First, estimate tax today. Example, you own an exchange-traded fund now worth $60,000 with an adjusted cost base of $40,000. That's $20,000 in capital gains. With the current 1/2 inclusion rate, $10,000 becomes taxable income. If your marginal rate is roughly 45%, the tax is about $4,500. Next, what happens if you move the net proceeds, about $5,500, into your tax-free savings account? If that TFSA position compounds at, let's say, 6% per year for the next decade, the future value inside the TFSA would be materially higher than holding the same investment in taxable form where annual distributions and eventual gains generate ongoing tax. The gap can easily reach the mid-five figures over a decade at common rates, which more than offsets the $4,500 paid today, but only if your time horizon is long enough. I recommend you run your own numbers since the math is sensitive to your investment returns and your tax rate based on your income and, of course, what province you live in. It's not about rushing. It's about being calculated. Rerun your tax trigger test each year, especially if your income or tax rules change. Small, steady moves can compound. So all in all, I recommend checking what your capital gains will be if you move money from a non-registered account to a TFSA and if it's worth the tax that you're going to pay. Here's a move that quietly saves thousands over a lifetime. Using low-income years to move money from an RRSP or RRIF into a TFSA. Every dollar that comes out of an RRSP or RRIF is taxable income, but every dollar that goes into a TFSA grows and can be withdrawn tax-free. If you can shift funds from the taxable bucket to the tax-free bucket in years when your marginal rate is low, you smooth your lifetime income tax curve. Now, keep in mind withdrawals from your RSP are subject to withholding taxes and may affect the amount available to actually roll into your TFSA. So here's an example. Ruth was 65. She had a sizable RRIF, receives maximum CPP and OAS benefits, and has unused TFSA contribution room. Because of the size of her RRIF account, when she turns 72, her required minimum RRIF withdrawals and other investment income will cause her OAS benefits to be clawed back. For the 2025 income year, the OAS callback threshold starts at just over $93,000. If Ruth starts withdrawing a controlled amount of money from her RRIF now and stays below the OAS clawback threshold and contributes these RRIF withdrawals to her TFSA, she will gradually shrink her RRIF, which lowers her future forced withdrawals and grows a flexible tax-free pool that she can tap into anytime through her TFSA. And at the same time, Ruth could avoid having your OAS benefits clawed back in the future. And you don't have to wait for retirement to use this move. This can also work before retirement. For example, if you take a sabbatical from work or you find yourself in a year where your business income drops, that's a window to consider modest RSP withdrawals to top up your TFSA. Just be intentional. Don't inadvertently push yourself into a much higher tax bracket, and do not forget to account for withholding tax on our RSP withdrawals. Asset location is the unsung hero of tax-smart investing. The short version, different accounts treat returns differently. So place each asset where it will perform the best. In a TFSA, capital gains, interest, and dividends are generally tax-free. I say generally because there are a few exceptions, such as a 15% foreign dividend withholding tax on foreign dividends. And because the TFSA is tax exempt, you lose the ability to claim the foreign tax credit to offset the tax you paid. There are also special CRA rules for non-qualified and prohibited investments, advantage situations, and business-like trading inside your TFSA. However, for most plain vanilla portfolios or the average retail investor portfolio, the TFSA shelter works as advertised. That makes the TFSA a strong home for higher growth positions you plan to hold for years and for interest-bearing investments for shorter-term time horizons. There's some nuance to this, however. Dividends earned on U.S. stocks face withholding tax inside a TFSA, and like I mentioned, you cannot claim the foreign tax credit. At the same time, dividends earned on U.S. stocks inside your RRSP or RRIF are exempt from this withholding tax. This makes the RSPs and RRIFs the better home for U.S. dividend payers. Meanwhile, Canadian eligible dividends benefit from the dividend tax credit in non-registered accounts, so they don't always need to take up TFSA space, especially if your personal dividend tax rate is already fairly modest. This is where your actual tax bracket and mix of income matter more than rules of thumb. Here's a simple way to picture it. Imagine your TFSA holds things you expect to grow the most over time, plus the heavy interest-bearing holdings and even Canadian real estate investment trusts, things that are tax inefficient outside of a TFSA. You could use your RSP or RRIF to hold things like foreign dividend payers that get tax treaty help, like many U.S. stocks, U.S. listed mutual funds, or U.S. ETFs. And your non-registered account could hold Canadian eligible dividend payers and low turnover capital gain heady positions that already get preferential tax treatment. When in doubt, shelter what would be taxed the hardest outside of the TFSA or what you expect to compound the most inside of it. Now, let's talk quickly about what this means for your estate, because this is something that is often overlooked. If you're married or in a common law relationship, the cleanest path is naming your spouse as a successor holder. When you pass, the TFSA simply continues in their name and the tax-free status continues. No account collapse, no lost tax shelter. Compare that to naming your spouse as beneficiary. Your TFSA stops being a TFSA as of your date of death. The fair market value of the TFSA at your death is tax-free to your spouse. However, any income or growth after your death from the date of death to the date the assets are paid out is taxable to your spouse. If your spouse wants to reinstate your TFSA's value, they can do so, but must file the appropriate paperwork with CRA within the prescribed deadlines. Failure to do so could mean the tax sheltering benefits of your TFSA could be lost forever. If instead you name your spouse the successor holder, the TFSA remains a TFSA, and even the post-death growth stays sheltered because the account never loses its status. George and Maya, both in their mid-70s, had set this up correctly. George named Maya as successor holder. If she had been listed only as beneficiary, the account would have collapsed, and while she could have made an exempt contribution up to the value at death within the allowed window, any interim growth could have created tax reporting headaches. By ensuring Maya was set up as a successor holder, the account just continued simple and clean. And just a quick administrative note as you consider all this, make sure the financial institution that has your TFSA has this successor holder recorded on the TFSA plan documents, not just your will. Financial institutions rely on their records, not the will, to process the rollover smoothly. And again, this is a really quick administrative update, often requiring just one signature, so I highly recommend you look into it. Here's what it all boils down to. A TFSA works best when you treat it like a flexible, tax-smart container, not a one-size-fits-all growth box. Start with time. When your timeline is short, stability wins. When it's long, tax-free compounding can carry more load. Then line up the funding. Move money in thoughtfully from taxable accounts when it passes the tax trigger test, and use low-income years to potentially funnel RSP or RRIF dollars into the TFSA without bumping up your tax bracket. Next, place each asset where it fits. High growth and interest-heavy pieces in the TFSA, foreign dividend pairs, especially those U.S. equities in an RRSP or a RRIF where the tax treaty can help, and Canadian eligible dividend pairs or low turnover capital gain heavy holdings in non-registered accounts where your personal tax rate makes sense. And finally, get the estate details right by naming a successor holder when you can so the TFSA continues seamlessly. Do those few things together and you'll reduce your overall tax hit, you'll cut volatility where it matters, and you'll keep your options open. Fewer surprises, fewer taxes, more control over what your money does for you. I hope this helped you think differently about your TFSA, but let me know in the comments if there's anything about your TFSA that makes you feel uncertain. Is it about choosing the mix inside, deciding when to top it up, or where it fits in your bigger tax plan? And if you're looking for a team that can help build a TFSA strategy for you that fits your timeline, tax picture, and estate plan, use the link in the description below to schedule a discovery conversation. We'll look at your situation, run the numbers, and can help and put together a plan that makes the most of your opportunities. If you found this helpful, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'm bringing more content and videos like this to help you make your money work harder for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.